On a quiet, ordinary night in a bustling casino, an unimaginable presence lurked in the shadows. It was silent, unseen by most, but to those it touched, it brought fear, madness, and death. This is the story of the shadow that killed her. Welcome to Eerie Road Tales, where we uncover the darkest and most spine-chilling true horror stories. Tonight, we delve into a harrowing account of a young woman whose life was tragically intertwined with a sinister presence beyond comprehension. By the end of this video, you'll understand how a seemingly ordinary workplace became the epicenter of supernatural terror, and how one shadow changed everything. If you're ready to explore the terrifying unknown, hit that subscribe button and join us on this journey into the dark. Our story begins in the sprawling confines of a bustling casino, located in an unnamed city. The casino, like many others, was a hub of constant activity, a place where excitement, desperation, and ambition collided under a sea of glittering lights. It was here, among the bright colors of slot machines and the murmur of hopeful gamblers, that one woman's life took a chilling turn. Jenny was a hardworking and ambitious gaming officer. She had recently received a promotion, a recognition of her dedication and skill. For her, this was more than just a job. It was a chance to climb the professional ladder and secure a better future. Jenny approached her new role with enthusiasm, unaware that it would lead her into an unimaginable nightmare. The casino itself was a maze of activity, but beyond the areas filled with guests and glamour lay a darker side, a hidden world known only to its staff. Its labyrinthine layout included long, dimly lit hallways, isolated storage rooms, and an old, rarely used employee restroom tucked away in a forgotten corner. This space, far from the glitz and chaos of the casino floor, seemed to carry an air of unease, as though it existed in another world entirely. Over the years, stories about the casino's darker corners began to circulate among the employees. These tales were passed quietly during breaks or after long shifts, dismissed by many as nothing more than overactive imaginations. Workers spoke of hearing disembodied footsteps echoing in empty hallways late at night. Some reported feeling sudden cold spots, as though invisible eyes were watching them. Others claimed objects would shift positions inexplicably when no one was around. The employee restroom, in particular, was the source of countless whispered rumors. Staff avoided it whenever possible, claiming that a strange sense of dread hung in the air. One janitor reported that the lights would flicker every time he entered, while another described the sound of muffled voices just beyond the stall doors, even when the restroom was empty. Jenny, however, was not one to believe in ghost stories. She was pragmatic, focused on her work, and chalked up these accounts to stress or fatigue. After all, the casino was a high-pressure environment. The stakes were always high, not just for the gamblers, but for the employees who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to keep everything running smoothly. But casinos are unique places. Unlike most environments, they operate 24/7, their lights never dimming and their energy never waning. This constant state of heightened emotion, from the thrill of winning to the despair of losing, creates an atmosphere unlike any other. Some believe that this intense emotional charge can leave an imprint, a kind of residual energy that lingers long after the moment has passed. It's a theory rooted in paranormal lore. High-stress environments with powerful emotional undercurrents are thought to attract supernatural entities. Places like hospitals, prisons, and yes, even casinos, are believed to become beacons for unexplained phenomena. The constant flow of human emotions, joy, anger, desperation, may serve as fuel for these entities, drawing them in like moths to a flame. This isn't just idle speculation. Across the world, there have been documented cases of paranormal activity in casinos. The Luxor Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, for example, has long been associated with eerie occurrences, including sightings of shadowy figures and unexplainable noises. Similarly, the Bullock Hotel and Casino in Deadwood, South Dakota, has earned a reputation for ghostly apparitions and strange phenomena tied to its long history. Was Jenny's casino any different? At first glance, it seemed like any other, a place of fortune and chance, filled with the sounds of spinning roulette wheels and the chatter of excited players. But as Jenny would soon discover, beneath the casino's polished exterior lay something far darker. As we explore her story, we must ask, was Jenny simply a victim of workplace stress, or was she targeted by something far more sinister? Did the intense energy of the casino awaken a presence that had been lying dormant, waiting for the right moment to strike? What started as small, unsettling incidents, cold drafts, misplaced objects, would soon escalate into a series of events that no one could explain. Events that would turn Jenny's workplace into a living nightmare. Stay with me as we uncover the chilling details of Jenny's descent into the unknown and the shadow that would change her life forever. Jenny's story began to take a dark turn not long after her promotion. At first, the strange events seemed trivial, so minor, in fact, that she barely gave them a second thought. Lights flickered unpredictably in her workspace, something easily blamed on faulty wiring in an old building. Then came the sensation of being watched. She would feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end, her instincts screaming that someone was standing just behind her. But every time she turned around, there was nothing there. On several occasions, Jenny felt cold drafts pass over her, even in the middle of the bustling casino floor, where the air was thick with heat from the crowds and machines. It was unsettling, but easy to dismiss. She told herself these things were normal, quirks of an old building, coincidences, or her imagination running wild after long shifts. But these occurrences didn't stop. Instead, they became more frequent, more intrusive. One night, as Jenny was locking up her station after hours, she felt a distinct tap on her shoulder. It was gentle, almost hesitant, as though someone was trying to get her attention without startling her. She turned around quickly, expecting to see a coworker, but there was no one there. The casino floor was empty. The sounds of distant slot machines and faint background music felt eerily distant, like a recording playing in another room. She tried to shake it off, telling herself she was overtired and imagining things. As she walked toward the employee restroom at the far end of the building, she began to hear faint footsteps behind her. The footsteps matched her own pace, stopping when she stopped, resuming when she moved. Her heart raced, but when she glanced back over her shoulder, the corridor was empty. Still, the footsteps persisted, soft but deliberate, as though someone or something was trailing just a few steps behind her. By the time she reached the restroom, Jenny was unnerved but determined not to let her fear show. She pushed open the heavy door, letting it creak shut behind her. Inside, the space was dimly lit, the fluorescent bulbs buzzing faintly overhead. She stepped into one of the stalls and locked the door, hoping to collect herself for a moment before heading home. Then she heard it, the heavy, deliberate sound of footsteps entering the restroom. They were not faint or hesitant. They were purposeful, almost predatory, and they echoed unnaturally in the small space. The footsteps stopped just outside her stall door. Jenny froze, every muscle in her body tensed. She held her breath, trying to convince herself it was a coworker playing a cruel prank or someone who had simply wandered in. But then, the door handle rattled violently. It wasn't the light jiggle of someone testing an occupied stall. It was a frantic, almost aggressive shaking. The metal clanged loudly, echoing in the confined space. Jenny felt a chill wash over her, colder and sharper than any draft she'd experienced on the casino floor. She pressed her hands against her mouth to stifle a scream, her eyes fixed on the narrow gap at the bottom of the stall. She could see no feet, no shadows, no sign of anyone outside. Yet the door handle continued to shake. Her heart pounded in her chest, the sound filling her ears as seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. And then, as suddenly as it began, the rattling stopped. The restroom fell silent, save for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Jenny sat frozen, unable to move, straining her ears for any sound that might hint at who or what had been there. Finally, summoning every ounce of courage, she reached out and unlatched the stall door. It creaked open slowly, and Jenny peered out into the restroom. It was empty. There was no sign of anyone. The door to the restroom itself was still closed, and the air felt oppressively still, as though the room was holding its breath along with her. Jenny rushed out, her pulse racing, and didn't stop until she was outside in the fresh night air. From that moment on, Jenny knew that whatever was happening wasn't normal. This wasn't faulty wiring or her imagination. It was something else, something far more unsettling. And whatever it was, it seemed to have taken an interest in her. The disturbances around Jenny didn't just persist. They became more frequent, more aggressive, and far harder to ignore. What began as faint, barely noticeable sensations quickly grew into undeniable encounters. Jenny began hearing whispers when she was alone, soft and indistinct, like a conversation happening just out of earshot. At first, she thought they were voices from the casino floor carrying through the walls, but the whispers followed her even into the quietest, most isolated parts of the building. Sometimes they seemed to be calling her name. Her vision began to play tricks on her, or so she thought. Shadows would dart across her peripheral vision, vanishing the moment she turned to look. It wasn't just fleeting glimpses either. Once, she saw a shadowy figure standing at the far end of a hallway. She blinked, and it was gone. Then there were the objects. Items on her workstation would shift positions when her back was turned, and papers she'd organized meticulously would suddenly scatter across the floor as if thrown by an invisible force. Once, her water bottle tipped over and rolled off the table without any apparent cause, even though no one else was near her. Jenny couldn't deny it anymore. Something was happening. Something she couldn't explain. The most terrifying moment came one night when Jenny was closing up. The casino was empty, the noise and energy of the day replaced by an unsettling silence. She finished her tasks and decided to use the restroom before heading home. The same restroom that had already left her shaken weeks earlier. As she walked past the large mirror above the sink, she caught sight of it. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't her imagination. Standing just behind her reflection was a black, humanoid mass. Its form was indistinct, almost as if it were made of thick, swirling smoke. But there was no mistaking the eyes. Faintly glowing, they stared directly at her, unblinking, piercing through her like it could see everything she was, everything she feared. Jenny froze. Her body refused to move, her mind racing as adrenaline flooded her veins. The room felt smaller, the air thick and suffocating, as though the shadow's very presence was draining the life out of the space. Then in an instant it was gone. The mirror reflected only her pale, terrified face. But the oppressive feeling lingered, hanging heavy in the room. Jenny didn't wait to see if it would return. She bolted from the restroom, her heart pounding in her chest, and didn't stop running until she was outside, gasping for air under the cold night sky. This encounter left Jenny deeply shaken. She couldn't rationalize what she had seen or experienced. It wasn't a fleeting sound or a vague shadow. This was something real, something tangible, something terrifying. In the days that followed, Jenny confided in a coworker, the narrator of this story. She admitted that she felt like she was being followed, not just in the casino, but everywhere she went. The sensation of being watched had become inescapable, like invisible eyes were constantly on her. Her once bright demeanor faded. She became withdrawn, her anxiety written plainly across her face. Simple tasks that had never bothered her before now filled her with dread. She avoided being alone whenever possible, staying in well-lit, crowded areas whenever she could. But despite her growing fear, Jenny continued to show up for work, clinging to the hope that whatever was tormenting her would eventually stop. Unfortunately for Jenny, the terror was far from over. If you're finding yourself drawn deeper into this chilling tale, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. On Eerie Road Tales, we bring you the most haunting and unexplainable stories rooted in reality. Stay with us, because Jenny's story is about to take an even darker turn. On the night of her death, something about Jenny was different. For weeks, she had been consumed by fear, her anxiety so palpable that even her coworkers couldn't ignore it. But that night, she seemed uncharacteristically cheerful, almost as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She confided in the narrator, the same person recounting this story, that she finally felt a sense of relief. Jenny said it was as though the oppressive presence that had haunted her for so long had finally vanished. Her smile was genuine, her voice light, and for the first time in weeks, she seemed like her old self again. At the end of her shift, Jenny left work around 11 p.m., saying goodbye to her colleagues for what would tragically be the last time. She climbed onto her motorcycle and headed home, unaware that she would never reach her destination. 20 minutes later, Jenny was found dead. Her motorcycle had crashed into a tree on an otherwise clear and unobstructed stretch of road. Witnesses who discovered the scene described it as strange. There were no signs of skid marks or any indication that she had tried to brake. It was as if she had simply lost control for no apparent reason. The official cause of death was ruled an accident. A tragic loss, the authorities said, possibly due to fatigue or distraction. But to those who knew Jenny and the torment she had endured, the explanation felt incomplete. That same night, as the clock struck 11:20 p.m., the approximate time of Jenny's crash, the narrator had their own encounter with the shadow. They had stayed behind at work, tidying up their station, when they decided to visit the employee restroom. As they washed their hands, they glanced up into the mirror, and there it was, the same black, humanoid mask Jenny had described, its faintly glowing eyes staring directly at them. The suffocating sense of dread was immediate, as though the room itself was collapsing inward. The shadow didn't move, but its presence was overpowering, its gaze impossible to escape. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. The narrator was left trembling, their mind racing with questions. Was this the same entity that had tormented Jenny? Had it finally left her, only to latch onto someone new? Or had it followed her beyond death, ensuring that her story and her terror would never truly end? The coincidence was too strong to ignore. The narrator couldn't shake the feeling that Jenny's death wasn't an accident. They began to wonder if the shadow had played a role, causing her to crash in some inexplicable way. And if that was the case, what was it? A ghost? A demon? Or something far beyond human comprehension? Even now, the questions remain unanswered. Jenny's story serves as a chilling reminder that some forces can't be explained or escaped. Whatever haunted her life, and possibly caused her death, seemed determined to leave a lasting mark on everyone it touched. Jenny's story is one that leaves us with far more questions than answers. At the heart of it lies the shadowy figure, an entity that defies explanation, but whose presence seemed to feed off fear, anxiety, and despair. Could this figure have been something supernatural? Around the world, accounts of shadow people have been reported for centuries. These entities are often described as dark, humanoid forms with no discernible features, though some, like the one Jenny encountered, are said to have glowing eyes. What makes these stories particularly chilling is their association with feelings of dread and, in some cases, death. Many believe shadow people are not mere apparitions, but malevolent entities, something beyond the realm of human understanding. In folklore, they are often linked to negative energy, thriving in places where emotions run high. Casinos, with their constant flow of hope, despair, and tension, would seem like an ideal feeding ground for such an entity. So, was this shadow merely an unfortunate coincidence in Jenny's life, or was it targeting her? The timeline of events is haunting. From the first whispers and cold drafts to her fatal accident, the presence seemed to intensify the more Jenny acknowledged it. And then there's the narrator's own experience, encountering the same shadow the very night of Jenny's death. Could this have been the entity's way of making itself known, reveling in the fear it had created? Or was it simply moving on, leaving Jenny behind as it sought a new target? These are questions we may never answer, but they leave us with an unsettling truth. Whatever this thing was, it changed the lives of those it touched forever. Shift to a slightly skeptical but balanced tone. Of course, not everyone believes in the supernatural. Some might argue that what Jenny experienced was the result of psychological stress. The pressures of her new promotion, long hours in a high-stakes environment, and perhaps even an overactive imagination could have contributed to hallucinations or misinterpretations of ordinary events. But how do we explain the shared experiences? Other employees at the casino reported similar disturbances, disembodied footsteps, whispers, and shadows that seemed to move on their own. These incidents weren't confined to Jenny alone, which makes the psychological explanation harder to accept. And then there's the matter of Jenny's untimely death. The lack of evidence pointing to any logical cause for her crash raises troubling questions. Could fear itself have played a role? Stress and terror can have profound effects on the human body and mind. But even this fails to explain the eerie precision with which the shadow seemed to anticipate her every move. In the end, Jenny's story forces us to confront the uncomfortable possibility that there are forces in this world we cannot see, explain, or control. Whether supernatural or psychological, her experiences and her fate serve as a chilling reminder of how thin the veil between our reality and the unknown may truly be. What do you think? Was Jenny's tragic death a mere accident, or was it the work of the shadowy figure that haunted her final days? Could it have been a manifestation of her fears, or something far darker and more malevolent? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more true horror tales that delve into the unknown, don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow horror enthusiasts, and hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us bring you more spine-chilling stories every week. Sometimes, the scariest encounters are the ones we can't explain. They're the moments that linger in the back of our minds, reminding us that there may be more to this world than meets the eye. Until next time, stay safe and beware of the shadows.